Welcome to Surrogacy Talk with me, your fabulous host and family building expert, Frank Golden. I'll be talking about surrogacy, IVF, and making babies. We have Amy Riley here in the studio this morning, author and pregnancy coach. Hello, Amy. Good morning.
Good
Say
morning.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
And we met Amy at an LGBT networking event last winter here in Chicago. She was one of the keynote speakers, and she so graciously accepted our invitation to be here in the studio. She published the book, Loving the Pregnant You. She's interviewed over 100 pregnant women, and one of them being a surrogate. So without further ado, I will let Amy take it away and introduce herself.
Sure. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and be on the podcast. A little bit about me. I have a background in training and development consulting and executive and life coaching, and I'm a big believer in identifying and leveraging your strengths in all areas of life. And after becoming a parent, I got passionate about bringing that coaching and that same mindset to parents. How do we leverage our strengths as parents? How do we find our unique way to do things? How do we love who we're being as parents and feel like we're doing it the best that we can, but also not putting pressure on ourselves to do everything that we possibly could do that's given to us in advice that we read in articles? It can become a lot of pressure right quickly.
To become that super parent, right?
Oh, yes. So I like to bring some relief and some calm and some confidence that we're doing this well. We're doing it our way.
That is just fascinating, especially to me because I'm relatively a new parent. I have a 4.5-year-old and an 11-month-old now. Wow.
Wow.
So, yeah, I could use all the advice that you have.
Can't we all?
Right?
There's a lot of phases to parenting.
So let's kind of dive right in here. First and foremost, Loving the Pregnant You. If you'd like to talk a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It was a personal experience. I realized as my husband and I were talking about, are we going to do this? When are we going to have kids? What is this going to look like? That I had some disempowering perspectives about it. I was kind of cynical about pregnancy. Yeah, and I thought I was living my life a much different way. I was a coach that was encouraging leaders and organizations to leverage your strengths, do it your way. And I wasn't practicing what I was preaching in this area of life. So I got a coach who's a mom and who also was a business owner. And I said, how am I going to do this my way? Because I had great moms in my life, but they weren't necessarily doing it the way that I would do it. So, Yeah, how do I find my way? And I started looking at the disempowering perspectives that I had, some of the seemingly neutral perspectives that I had that really kind of netted out as disempowering. And I just started shifting those, and I ended up having a great pregnancy experience. And someone said to me, you should write a book. And I thought, that's an intriguing idea, but who cares? Who cares what I did? Right. That was my whole point before. Like, I had great moms in my life, but I needed to find my own way. So it literally took me about a year until the idea dawned on me. Interview lots of women. Interview lots of moms who've gone through pregnancy and get their stories about what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And so their stories are in the Loving the Pregnant You book. And I tried to write it like a coach, tee up a topic, and then tell very different stories about how women handled it very differently, so that the reader could maybe resonate with this story, not resonate with this story. Okay, Great. That's good information too. Don't want to do it that way. Could maybe resonate with what this woman did. And then there's check-in questions along the way, which are really open-ended questions. Okay, how would you approach this aspect?
And I'm sure women that are listening are wondering, what does the book discuss, being pregnant and going through an emotional change in terms of how they assess their physical attributes, working mothers, how they handle their pregnancy, what kinds of topics, if you could give a preview? Yeah.
There is a chapter in there on embracing your feelings and how things change, how some women feel their emotions more intensely. What does that look like? How can we give ourselves permission to feel how we feel and deal with them in a way that works for us and the people around us? There's a chapter in there about being a publicly pregnant person, because I think pregnancy is a unique life circumstance, especially when we get in the second and third trimesters, where people can look at you and know
that you're pregnant.
There's a pregnancy going on, right? That doesn't happen in other areas of our lives. Like, they might not look at us and know we're up for a promotion at work, or we're engaged, or we're in the midst of moving, but this is something people see, and they strike up conversation about it immediately. So I have found that to be a fascinating phenomenon, and women have very different reactions and ways of dealing with that publicness of it, if you will.
I think that's so fascinating because it sounds like the book would provide such a really great foundation for women that are pregnant, especially for the first time, and then how that relates to golden surrogacy is for our surrogates. Going through a pregnancy is new and challenging, as you just pointed out.
Yep.
The first time without being a surrogate mother, and then having to deal with all of those different aspects as a surrogate probably brings all these other questions from other people.
Absolutely. Well, there are these patterned conversations that happen around pregnancy. Oh, congratulations. When are you due? Is it a boy or a girl? Do you have names? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, how does a surrogate answer and engage with all of those questions, right? When do you say the whole set of circumstances? Mm-hmm. When do you just let others? I know there's I interviewed a surrogate for the book, and she said that was always a choice in engaging in conversations with other people. Is it a complete stranger, and she's going to let that stranger assume that this is, her biological baby in her belly, or is she going to bring up that, oh, this is a surrogacy pregnancy? Yeah, here's the parents, and explain in the circumstances. And when is she going to let them make their own assumptions and go their separate ways?
So if you could kind of talk about more about that interviewing a surrogate for the book, and how did all the different types of advice that you would give a pregnant woman, and then how that varied from, someone not in a surrogate situation to a surrogate.
Yeah. It was really interesting interviewing her. And first of all, she could clearly describe the sense of purpose that she felt in her body, in her life when she was pregnant. And she really enjoyed that. And a set of circumstances arose for her where she could provide a baby for a gay couple that she knew. And so she decided to do it. It was her fourth pregnancy. They had 3 kids at home. And the things that stick out for me the most about our conversation was, one, balancing this with her current family. Now I need to spend time taking care of myself, nurturing this baby that's for another family. And explaining that, and having those conversations with young kids at home, and how that balance looked for her on a day-to-day basis. There might be days where she's like, okay, mom really needs to put her feet up, right? I need to take care of me and the baby today. And then when were there choices like, my family needs me and I'm going to push myself a little bit today? And how that was a choice for her often, and it felt like a balancing act there. The other thing that really sticks out for me about our conversation is that she felt more worried about this pregnancy, right? I'm taking care of this baby for another family. I've got to do this right. I've got to do this well. Is the baby okay? I haven't felt him or her kick for a little bit. Right. But, please, I want to feel some movement there. She felt herself having a little bit more anxiety around that, and needing to focus on how do I relax? How do I be at peace? And try to give a calm environment
and
here.
That totally confirms, when I'm talking with intended parents, many times they ask me, well, how do you know the surrogate is doing a good job growing us a healthy baby? And I tell them just that. In most of the cases, the surrogate will convey to us that they almost treat the pregnancy even more critically than they did their own pregnancy, because they know that it's for someone else. They're creating a family from scratch for someone else. It's not their family, and they need to do an extra great job and just go the extra mile. So that totally confirms for all of you intended parents out there listening, this is the way it is for many of the surrogates. In terms of advice that you would give, just a typical pregnant woman, is there different advice that you would give a surrogate mother, for instance?
Yeah. So typically, I find that the piece of guidance or coaching that I come back to most frequently is look for what resonates for you. I'm not one that says you've got to do this, you've got to have an epidural, you should go get a doula. Specific choices is not what I give advice about. It's how do we check in with ourselves and find what resonates for us and is going to work best for us. So look for what resonates for you is the piece of advice I give most often. And how can we release the rest, right? And a good way to do this is to know our values. What's most important to me? Because you can feel that pressure to do this and exercise and have the all organic kitchen and and we're not going to possibly do every piece of advice that comes across our radar. So what are our values so that we know that we are doing what's most important to us? So the same kind of advice would fit for a surrogate, yet there's some more considerations there, aren't there? So when you look at your values, you're looking at your values of you and your partner. Typically, if a pregnancy is planned, the pregnant woman probably knows her partner pretty well and what is important to him or her. So in a surrogacy situation, how do you streamline that? So I would encourage conversations around values of the surrogate, values of the intended parents, and not to give the surrogate more to do, more values to align with, but where are they aligned, right? And what is most important and works for you as a surrogate. And so then when daily choices come up, you'll know you're hitting those things that are most important for the intended parents. And hopefully be able to release some of the other, I should do this, I should do that, and the extra pressure that we've been talking about.
Right, because it's an emotional journey. And, one of the most common piece of advice that I give is that it's very important to identify your feelings and know that it's an emotional process and not to try to hide things or cover things up, but to really identify them and then be open and honest and have that line of communication with the intended parent. So you also confirmed that as well.
That's great. Yeah, it's great. No, our feelings are important data, right? They're guiding us in some way. And yeah.
And then in terms of, for our intended parents, what kinds of advice would you give intended parents for how they could best support their surrogate through that pregnancy process? And keeping in mind that we have same-sex couples that are intended parents, we have heterosexual couples where the dynamic between the intended mother and a surrogate might differ as well. So maybe break that question into two. For a gay couple, how would they support their surrogate? And then, for an intended couple that's heterosexual, the intended mother, how would an intended mother kind of go through and support the surrogate pregnancy, given the fact that she's not able to carry herself, and how would that affect things?
Yeah. I don't know that my answer would be much different for the different sets of parents, because what immediately came to mind was respecting the surrogate's need to do some things her way. Right? And the more relaxed and in the zone that she can feel, the better environment.
So try not to add added pressure.
Baby. Yeah. Well, and be willing to be open and frank about values and what's important to you. And maybe be able to say some things that are important to you versus not as important to you. For example, it would be important to us that you do whatever it takes to, minimize stress in your life. Versus, we don't care if you're exercising every single day, right? We more want you to release stress, however that looks for you. Or, we want to get together so the baby can hear our voices versus we don't need all the information about the process you're going through with your doctor. So maybe some of the things that aren't as important, like you can let this go. Like, don't stress about this. Don't pile this on.
And so, globally speaking, don't micromanage the entire pregnancy. Focus on what's important to you. Have those open lines of communication with your surrogate, and maybe focus on those, but find an appropriate way to do so. That's the gist I'm taking from it.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you for summarizing that well. Yeah, because if you really have that open, vulnerable, I know it takes vulnerability and courage to really put out there what works for us, what's most important to us, what really is workable for you. And if you get on the same page about some of that important stuff early on, then there's more trust there.
Oh, that's a great point. And that brings me into my next question. For intended parents listening, why is it important for them to provide pregnancy coaching or pregnancy education or, things like that? Or perhaps buy them this book, Loving the Pregnant You.
Yes. It's really overall to support her to feel calm and confident and at peace with what she's doing, the choices that she's making day to day. Maybe more specifically, to give some tools, to navigate this experience. We've already talked about it, a lot of people out there in the world haven't had exposure to a surrogacy situation, right? And they might not know what to say. And they might come with concerns or questions or judgment, giving the surrogacy tools to deal with that, and also to communicate and have a strong, open relationship with attended parents. How to feel confident, comfortable, bringing up different kinds of conversations, and navigating that with an unbiased third-party person, right? Because even if the surrogate has support people in her life, they're probably not unbiased, which is appropriate, right?
Right. You'd hope so.
Right? They're going to have opinions about
Right.
what is best for my loved ones, and to be able to have a sounding board to talk through how do we create win-win-win circumstances in different situations that come up can just be a really nice support to have when, you're navigating a number of different things here, physically and emotionally.
Right, and it's important for the intended parents, and I think if they take a more active role in the education or in the support, then I think that also brings them closer to the pregnancy as well. That's just my personal opinion I've gone through the process with multiple surrogates, and I know for Adam and I it was a very emotional experience, and we thrust ourselves into it and made ourselves a part of it at every turn that we possibly could without being overbearing.
Yeah.
So for intended parents, kind of switching gears here, parenting advice for intended parents, maybe with newborns.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things that we've been talking about would still apply, right? Look for what resonates for you. Know your values, what's most important to you, what are the things you can let go of. The other piece of advice I'd put in there is remember you've never done this before.
That is so true.
We think we become parents, and this maternal or paternal thing is just going to switch on, and we're going to know what to do for baby, child, teenager, for all of these phases. And so much is called for from parents. So many ways of being, so many abilities, especially if you consider all the different phases that the kids will go through. You have 2 different kids, 2 different phases, different sets of needs, right?
Right. So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
And I know many people listening would probably have the same question because it's a pretty common thing now. So my husband and I were young working parents. We're really motivated to make our business a success. We put all of our energy into it, and we're constantly struggling with our time. Are we spending enough time with our daughter? She's 4.5. She likes to go to the park. There's many different activities that she likes to do, but we're workaholics. We're constantly glued to our mobile devices and our laptops, and we're always putting every last drop of energy into the business. And so, at night we look at each other, we're in bed, and we look at each other and we say, did we spend enough time with, or did I get a chance to cuddle with the little one today? Like, it's just, these are the things that stress us out, because we're constantly trying to balance work with, are we being good parents? Are we, so what do you say to the working parent that is just, they're trying to be workaholic, to be a great success, to obviously provide for their family, but they're trying to balance that with being a good parent?
Yeah. A few things come to mind. I mean, one is looking at balance over time. I mean, it's not necessarily in one day or in 1 hour, right? That we're spending time or taking care of all the different aspects of our lives. And sometimes things are prioritized over others. I've had the situation dealing with health issues with my parents. And I've had to intentionally decide, I'm not going to be such a great mom this week. I'm going to be an awesome daughter this week, right? And that balances out over time. And then there would be times where I've shown up for my parents a lot. The kids have a few things going on this week, like not going to be such the great daughter this week, right? I'm going to be focused over here. So looking at balance in a bigger time frame, if you will, is one thing. Another consideration is integration, right? And our mobile devices can allow for that, right? We can be at the park and be hanging out, and
it's so true. I mean, we'll be at the park, and but we know that we're not there. We're not we're there physically, but we're not present. So it
that was actually the next thing I was going to bring up. It's about doing your best to be where you are. And even if that means, okay, we're at the park, there are 2 emails I want to respond to, right? So now I'm going to be with my emails while I take care of these 2 things, right? And then that's done. Now I'm back present here. And I think that's one of the trickiest things. And it goes a long way when we can feel like at the end of the day, I was present where I was at throughout the day, and doing our best to mentally shift and shut down the other. And I think sometimes that's about finding some techniques during the transition, right? Just kind of letting ourselves maybe unplug, just kind of name our feelings. Like, let's say we're leaving the workday and we're commuting home. Mm-hmm. I know you only have 5 minutes for this because your commute is short.
Yes, my commute is very short.
Right, just kind of download and mentally unplug from the day, right? Say for yourself, here's how the day went. I was excited about that. I was disappointed about that. My head's still churning on that one. And just kind of name where you're at with the day. It kind of helps set it aside and state an intention for the next segment, right? Have fun. See my daughter this, whatever it is.
So maybe for new parents in our program, expecting young ones to, like you said, kind of practice, right? Like be in the moment, focus on one thing at a time, but then overall, globally speaking, consistency over time, right? So that way when their child comes, they're not worried about the things I'm worried about right now. Am I being a good parent? Am I being a good boss at work? There's all these different things. So I think that's really great advice, that they start building those habits now and practice, quote unquote practice,
Yeah, and then I think there's more, as the kids get older, I think there's more opportunities for that integration that I was talking about. I recently had what felt like a success story in this area. I trained for triathlons, and that can take me away from my family, right? Well, I had a weekend where I went to visit friends in Texas. It's a college friend of mine. So we went and we stayed with her family, so friends, right? I did a triathlon while I was there. So my triathlon hobby, I took my daughter with me. So we had mom-daughter time. And then it was also a growth experience for her because she was going to be with this family and like taking care of herself and being with their younger children while I went off for a half a day and did this triathlon. So it was a growth experience for her. And I had open conversations with everybody about it ahead of time. Like, were my friends comfortable with my daughter being with them for half a day? What would be your concerns about that? Just really had it be as open as possible. So I knew that everyone was saying what worked for them. And, it felt like a win-win-win and like a way to integrate different areas of life.
So that's amazing. And that's something that I have to work on, I'm sure. So my other question is, and it's probably along the same lines as, how do you not, I guess, lose who you were before you became a parent? How do you remember to still be you and be all the other things that you need to be out of necessity for your children?
Yes. I think we just need to prioritize that. And I know a lot of parents can feel like we've got to sacrifice, we've got to do for, we've got to be with the kids as much as we can. And, we had our hobbies and our interests in the ways that we spent our time prior to being parents. And I encourage parents to hold on to that and carve that out and make that a priority as much as possible. And two ways that might help people give themselves permission to do that. One, we can't take care of others if we're not fueling and taking care of ourselves, right? And honestly, like going out for a run or doing some training for a triathlon, it gets the stress out for me. It's doing for me so that I can do for others. So we can't take care of others unless we take care of ourselves. And then the second thing is, I think about this especially with my daughter, like I want a role model doing the things that I enjoy and carving out time for me, because I want her to be a person that gives herself the permission to do that. So role modeling what we're going to want them to do for themselves in the future might be two ways to look at it.
I think those are great.
To give permission to it's okay. It's actually I think it's very beneficial to everyone for parents to have their own time.
Say like in a circumstance where I went through surrogacy and I wanted to have, our children so badly over the years, and we went through, many years of struggles, failed transfers and things like that. And then you have your children, and then I'm sure you reach a boiling point at some point in time where it just, reaches the top, right? You can't do everything in a day, or you get frustrated with the children. And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that, I guess is the right word.
Yeah. Well, I think it's coming back to, remember, you've never done this before, and being really gentle and compassionate with ourselves and our emotions around this, because it is an important job and we feel passionate about it. And we put pressure on ourselves to do it well and to do it right and to be focused on all the right things. But yeah, we're going to explode if we if we keep doing that. So what are the ways that we release the pressure, which could be, doing the things that we enjoy. It could be nourishing ourselves. Like, what is our self-care? And again, that idea of we got to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of the kids and others around us. And that nourishing ourselves is part of the process of achieving what we want to achieve in life. It's not the thing that we reward ourselves with once we get through this mountain of to-dos and results that we want to achieve. Then there'll be time for, I don't know, an evening with your feet up with a glass of wine or right. a massage or a time with a good book or a walk in nature or whatever it is. But what are those things that help us take care of us?
Do you think the same vein of advice could be applied to surrogates? They've been pregnant before, but they haven't been a surrogate before.
Yes.
And I when we interview many of our applicants, they seem to have somewhat of an arrogance about it. Well, I've been pregnant before. I've done this many times, but they haven't been a surrogate before.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I even say that to parents when it's not a surrogacy situation, where it's your second pregnancy, or even when it's your fourth pregnancy, right? You're having your fourth kid. You've never been pregnant with this child before, with 3 kids in the house, or, like circumstances are constantly changing. And really, physically, emotionally in your body, pregnancies can feel really different one from another. And I've worked with women who've had a few pregnancies that went one way, and then, oh my gosh, the fourth one went a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
So not only that, but yes, all the new nuances and considerations in a surrogacy situation. You've never done this before.
Right.
I would even say that if it's your second surrogacy pregnancy, right? You've never done this before with maybe these parents in this set of circumstances, right?
So if you could interview a surrogate again, and how long ago was that you interviewed that surrogate?
So I did most of the interviews when I was pregnant with my son, and he is now 8. And the book was published about 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, that interview probably took place about 8 years ago.
Oh, okay. So it's been a little while.
It has.
So if you could interview a surrogate today, what questions would you ask now, obviously, knowing what you asked in the past, and then all of your experience now in the industry and things like that?
Yeah. Well, this might sound really general and not very specific, but I would really start off with asking what's going well. Right, to have them focus on everything that's working, because it becomes so easy to focus on what's not ideal, what's not going totally the way that you want, what's concerning you or keeping you up at night. So to have her focus on what's going well. And I would follow that up with, what do you want to specifically acknowledge yourself for?
I think that's great. That is really great. And I think from a journey aspect, it keeps things much more positive thinking, which is what you want for a pregnancy anyway. Stress levels are not good for a pregnancy. So we're always talking with our surrogates and texting them and, keeping them in a positive mind frame. So what other pieces of advice do you have for our listeners that maybe we haven't even touched base on here yet?
Yeah. The biggies that I talk about are look for what resonates for you, nourish yourself, deal with concerns in an empowering way. Concerns are kind of an interesting balance, right? We don't want to wallow in our concerns or our fears and get ourselves more worked up about something than we need to be, especially if there's some aspects of it that really are out of our control. Yet, our concerns are telling us something. Right? So how can we look at them in a healthy way, decide what we just need to let go of, and let God or let universe or whatever our language or belief might be, and what are some things that we might choose to do around it. So how do you deal with concerns in a healthy way? Remember, you've never done this before is a key piece of guidance that I often come back to. Those are the big ones.
I think that's amazing. And it's really fascinating how we're able to tie in all of these different topics to surrogacy, and how becoming a surrogate, how being an intended parent for the first time, all of these different things kind of relate to one another. And making time and kind of coaching and preparing yourself for becoming a parent. But I think all those things are really fascinating.
Me too.
Anything else while we have you here in our studio? Anything else that I have not asked you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest message is do it your way. Find what works for you. Leverage your strengths. Don't focus on what's not working or what you can't do as well as you can, because there's on the pregnancy side and the parenting side, there's a lot of phases that we're going to go through, and no human is great at all aspects of it, right? So be gentle and compassionate with yourself. Do what you can so you can love the pregnant you.
Well, that is amazing. I feel so inspired having you here today. I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to have another baby so I can go through another pregnancy with a surrogate again. But I will just have to live vicariously through our surrogates in our program because that is not happening. Child number 3 is not happening.
Okay.
And watch
That
as I
sounds
say
clear.
this. Yeah. But again, I would just like to thank you for being here today. Again, for everyone listening, we have Amy Riley here in the studio who has written the book, Loving the Pregnant You. Would you like to talk about where it's available? How can people get this book?
Yes, you can find Loving the Pregnant You on Amazon.com. It's available in paperback and Kindle version. And you can check out more, including a blog and a free pregnancy coaching session that you can check out or tell a friend about at lovingthepregnantyou.com.
Once again, I'd like to thank Amy Riley for being here in the studio with us today, author and pregnancy coach extraordinaire, as we could all tell. We had a really great conversation with you today. Thank you once again. With that said, I would like to thank all of our listeners. Please be sure that if you have any topics that you'd like us to discuss in the future, you can email us at info@goldensurrogacy.com. Be sure to follow all of our social media accounts at Golden Surrogacy is the handle. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this podcast segment. This is Frank Golden reminding you that everyone deserves a family.